My name is Ethan Cole, and for most of my life, my family introduced me with a laugh. "This is Ethan," my father would say at family dinners, shaking his head like I was some kind of long running joke. "Our failure." Everyone would chuckle awkwardly while I forced a smile and stared down at my plate like it didn't bother me anymore. But it always did. I was the youngest of three brothers, the only one who didn't follow the family business. My father owned a successful construction company in Chicago, and according to him, real men worked with their hands, wore steel-toe boots, and never complained. My older brothers, Ryan and Mason, fit perfectly into that world. I didn't. I liked computers, numbers, quiet rooms. I studied accounting while my brothers mocked me for carrying a backpack instead of a toolbox. My father called my degree cute. My mother never defended me. She'd just smile nervously and change the subject. The worst part wasn't the insults, it was the way they slowly convinced everyone else I was useless too. At family gatherings, Ryan would brag about buying a new truck, while Mason talked about landing another construction contract. Then someone would eventually look at me and ask, "So, Ethan, what exactly do you do again?" Before I could answer, Dad always jumped in first. He sits behind a desk, pushing papers around. God knows how he even pays rent. Everyone laughed. What none of them knew was that for the last 4 years, I'd been quietly fixing the financial disasters they kept creating behind closed doors. Unpaid taxes, hidden loans, missed payrolls. Every few months, Dad would call me late at night, sounding suddenly humble. "Son, we've got a little problem." A little problem usually meant another lawsuit avoided because I spent entire weekends untangling their accounts for free. I never asked for credit. I just wanted my family to finally respect me. But respect never came. Only more jokes. Then came the night everything changed. It was Thanksgiving. 23 people packed into my parents' dining room while rain hammered the windows outside. My brothers were drunk, loud, showing off expensive watches they couldn't actually afford. I was helping Mom clean dishes when Dad raised his glass from the head of the table. "Let's make a toast," he announced proudly, to my sons who actually became something. The room exploded with laughter before his eyes landed on me. "And to Ethan." He smirked. "Maybe one day he'll surprise us all." More laughter. Even my cousins joined in. I stood there holding a wet dinner plate while heat crawled up my neck. My mother avoided my eyes completely. Then Ryan leaned back in his chair with a grin. "Careful, Dad. If Ethan ever becomes successful, hell might freeze over first." That was the moment something inside me finally stopped. Not cracked, not hurt, stopped. I used to think being called the failure couldn't hurt anymore. After hearing it for almost 30 years, the words had lost their sharpness. At least that's what I told myself. But the truth is, every joke at family dinners, every disappointed look from my father, every comparison to my younger brother Daniel still landed somewhere deep inside me. Daniel was the golden child. Straight A's, expensive suits, corporate job by 24. Meanwhile, I was the daughter who opened a small property management company after dropping out of law school during Mom's cancer treatment. To my family, that made me the one who couldn't finish anything. What none of them knew was that my little company had quietly grown into one of the largest private property investment firms in the county. And one of the buildings my company had recently acquired was the exact apartment complex where my parents lived. I found out by accident. 3 weeks after our family dinner disaster, my assistant walked into my office carrying a thick stack of tenant files from a newly purchased property. I was barely paying attention while signing paperwork between calls. Then I saw my father's name, Harold Bennett, Unit 4C. For a second, I thought there had to be another Harold Bennett in the city. But then I saw Mom's name underneath, along with the address I'd visited since childhood. My chest tightened. "Where did this property come from?" I asked. "Foreclosure acquisition," my assistant replied. "Previous owner defaulted on taxes. We finalized the transfer this morning." I slowly opened the file. 6 months behind on rent, 3 formal complaints from neighbors, multiple bounced checks, and at the very top of the page, highlighted in red, "Final eviction. Notice pending." I stared at those words for a long time, not because I wanted revenge, because I realized my parents were drowning financially, and they had hidden it from everyone while still mocking me every chance they got. The same father who laughed at my failed life choices was now days away from losing his home. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I just felt tired. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Mom. "Your brother got promoted today. We're having dinner Sunday. Try not to embarrass yourself this time. I read the message twice, then I looked back down at the eviction file sitting on my desk, and for the first time in my life, I said nothing. Silence. By the time I turned 28, I had stopped expecting kindness from my family. That sounds dramatic, I know, but after years of being treated like the backup child, you eventually learn to survive on emotional scraps. My older brother Ethan was the golden son. He dropped out of college twice, crashed 3 cars, and somehow still got praised like he was a misunderstood genius. Meanwhile, I worked 60-hour weeks managing a logistics warehouse, paid my own bills, and somehow still carried the title of family disappointment. The worst part wasn't even the insults, it was how casual they were, like it had become normal. At every holiday dinner, my father found a way to humiliate me. Still lifting boxes for a living? He'd ask while Ethan sat there scrolling through crypto apps on his phone, pretending he was an entrepreneur. Mom would laugh nervously and say, "We just expected more from you, Claire." Expected more, even though I was the only one who never asked them for money. 3 years earlier, after Dad's failed investment disaster, they almost lost the house. Ethan disappeared the second creditors started calling. I was the one who stepped in, quietly, secretly. I covered overdue utility bills, paid their property taxes twice, even negotiated with the bank after Dad begged me not to let the neighbors find out. But none of that changed how they saw me, because in my family, sacrifice only mattered when Ethan made it. 2 weeks after my promotion to regional operations manager, I made the mistake of inviting them to dinner. I thought maybe if they saw the apartment, the promotion, the life I'd built alone, something would finally click. Instead, halfway through dinner, Dad looked around my apartment and said, "You know, all this still feels temporary. People like you don't usually keep success very long. People like you." I still remember the silence after that sentence. Even Ethan looked uncomfortable for once. Then Mom added the sentence that finally broke something inside me. "At least your brother still has ambition." Ambition? The man was 35 years old and sleeping on their couch. I smiled anyway, paid the bill anyway, drove them home anyway. But that night, sitting alone in my apartment staring at the city lights, I opened an email I'd been avoiding for weeks. Subject line, "Final foreclosure processing approval." And for the first time in my life, I didn't save them. The dinner table went silent the moment my father dropped the envelope in front of me. My mother wouldn't even look at me. She just kept cutting her chicken into tiny pieces like she was trying to avoid whatever was coming next. Ethan leaned back in his chair with that smug little smile he always wore whenever I was about to be humiliated. "Go ahead," Dad said coldly. "Open it." I stared at the envelope for a second before sliding my finger underneath the flap. My stomach tightened the second I saw the logo on the paper inside. It was from the bank. Final notice. My chest felt heavy as I read the first few lines. Missed payments, legal action pending. Foreclosure process beginning within 30 days. I looked up slowly. "Why are you showing me this?" Dad laughed once, a bitter sound. "Because this is what happens when one child in this family refuses to contribute." I blinked. "What?" "You heard him," my mother snapped suddenly, finally looking at me. "Your brother has been carrying this family for years while you run around pretending your little online business matters." My hands clenched underneath the table. Ethan smirked. "Honestly, Mia, you're 30 years old. Maybe it's time you stop acting like a teenager and actually help for once." I almost laughed at the irony. Help? For 3 years, I had secretly been paying half their mortgage through anonymous transfers after Dad's construction business collapsed during the recession. They never knew it was me because I routed everything through a private financial account under my company name, and the only reason I stopped 2 months ago was because I discovered what they'd done. The memories hit me instantly. Dad calling me a disappointment in front of relatives. Mom introducing Ethan as the successful child. Them mocking me for working from home while Ethan burned through their savings pretending to be a stock market genius. But the final betrayal came 6 weeks ago. I had walked into their house unexpectedly and overheard Ethan talking in the kitchen. "She'll never know," he whispered. Dad laughed quietly. "Even if she finds out, who cares? That girl's too weak to leave this family." Then Ethan said the sentence that changed everything. "Once the house is sold, we can finally get rid of her completely." I never told them I heard it, I just stopped the payments. And now the foreclosure notice was sitting right in front of me. Dad leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Well, aren't you going to say something?" I slowly folded the paper and placed it back inside the envelope. Then I looked directly at him. "You really want to know why this is happening?" The confidence on Ethan's face flickered for the first time, and suddenly, nobody at that table looked comfortable anymore. Silence. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of my father's breathing. Heavy, uneven, panicked. He stood there staring at the eviction notice in his trembling hands like it was written in another language. My mother looked frozen beside him, her expensive pearl necklace shaking against her chest as tears filled her eyes. Vanessa kept opening and closing her mouth, trying to say something, but no words came out. For the first time in my life, none of them knew how to control the room anymore. The property manager cleared his throat awkwardly. Mr. and Mrs. Holloway, unless the overdue balance is paid within 72 hours, the bank will proceed with legal repossession. My father snapped toward him. There has to be some mistake. We've lived here for 20 years. The man hesitated before answering. Sir, the payment stopped 6 months ago. 6 months. Exactly the same day I stopped sending money. A strange silence settled inside me. Not satisfaction, not revenge. Just truth, finally standing in the open where nobody could hide from it anymore. Vanessa suddenly pointed at me. You did this on purpose. Her voice cracked so loudly several relatives turned toward her. You wanted to embarrass us. I looked directly at her. No, I wanted to stop saving people who were destroying me. That shut her up instantly. Mom stepped forward then, tears rolling down her cheeks. Emily, please. We're family. Families help each other. I almost laughed at how familiar those words sounded now. Funny how family only mattered when they needed something. I stared at her for a long moment before answering quietly. Where was that family when I was sleeping in my car after college because nobody would help me? Nobody spoke. Where was that family when Dad told everyone I was a disappointment because I worked at a grocery store instead of joining Vanessa's business? My father lowered his eyes. And where was that family when my electricity got shut off while I was sending you money every month? The room felt smaller with every sentence. My uncle slowly removed his glasses and looked at my father in disbelief. Richard, is that true? Dad said nothing. That silence told everyone everything. Silence. The auction hall went completely silent after the lawyer read the final line of the document. I could actually hear the faint buzzing of the ceiling lights above us. My father's face had lost all color. My mother looked like she couldn't breathe. And my brother Ethan. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time in his life. The attorney adjusted his glasses and repeated himself carefully. According to the court-approved property transfer, the Whitmore residence now legally belongs to Miss Claire Whitmore. My name echoed through the room like a gunshot. For a second, nobody moved. Then my father suddenly stood up so fast his chair slammed against the marble floor. That's impossible, he barked. There has to be some mistake. The lawyer calmly opened another folder. There is no mistake, sir. The house was placed as collateral against unpaid debt 18 months ago. The debt was later purchased legally by Miss Whitmore. My mother turned toward me slowly, her lips trembling. You bought our debt? I looked at her quietly. No, Mom. I bought my future back. The words hit harder than I expected. I saw it in her eyes immediately, that realization, that terrifying moment when someone finally understands they no longer control you. Ethan let out a nervous laugh. Okay, seriously, Claire, stop messing around. You're saying you own the house now? I reached into my bag and placed the property documents on the table between us. I'm saying the bank gave you 6 notices, I said calmly. You ignored every single one because you assumed someone would save you again. Nobody spoke, because they all knew exactly who that someone used to be. For years, I had been paying pieces of their life without recognition. Utility bills, emergency repairs, insurance payments, quiet transfers labeled temporary help. Every time they overspent on Ethan's failed business ideas, I covered the damage while being reminded I was still the family disappointment. And the worst part? They never even noticed. Not once did they ask how I managed 2 jobs while finishing graduate school. Not once did they care why I stopped buying things for myself. As long as their lives stayed comfortable, my exhaustion was invisible. Until I stopped. My father suddenly pointed at me, rage shaking through his voice. You planned this. I held a stare. No, I said softly. You planned this the moment you taught me I only mattered when I was useful. Silence.